over plans. Me and Aaron have had the pleasure of reading it over the past couple of weeks. And just a quick summary, the book gives some big questions. I'm going to say big questions because they are big statements in the book, which is great. A couple of them are what if efforts to prevent World War II actually caused it? What if Hitler's actions changed racism in unexpected ways? Or what if environmentalism actually leads to more CO2 emissions? So I just want to give a warm welcome to Vlad and Allison, the authors of the book. Hello and welcome.
Hi guys.
Hello.
Hi guys. Congrats on the release of the book. I saw on your Twitter that it got #7 bestseller in political history and of revolution and coups.
It did, yes. I know it's a small category, but still, it comes under bestseller, which you saw for yourself. We didn't invent anything, so I mean, right now it's at number 52 in that category, but still, it's an achievement. It's an achievement. Any achievement is an achievement. Even a small achievement is always an achievement. So yeah, we're happy about that.
Stick to the script.
Yes. We're very happy about that. I'm ecstatic about that. I put it everywhere on the internet. Everywhere.
Not in the script.
I must say as well, the book is a dream to read. It's
Oh, really?
yeah, it's like you've gone complex topics and made it so digestible. So like, hats off to that.
Yeah, it's definitely digestible. Every chapter feels like a book in itself in terms of the new topics, but you can literally, now we've read it, if we ever wanted to go back and recap, we could just pick it up, go to a certain chapter, and just learn more about that one topic that you've talked about. So it feels more like a usable book than a book you're just going to read and then put to one side. You can go back to it and quickly take in the content again. So well done, guys.
Thanks. Like a reference book. Well, this was part of the idea, by the way, that it could be used for reference, for finding sources, because 1/3 of the book is the quoted sources, reference sources.
Yeah, it's heavily sourced. And I was even saying to Aaron when I was a couple chapters into it, like just looking through the sources, there's different rabbit holes I want to go down just from reading the book. I want to go and check out some of these sources just to read what you guys read when you found the sources, just to get a bit more insight in areas. But yeah, it's been good.
We needed a lot of sources because people otherwise would easily dismiss us as fantasists. Fantasist? Is this yeah. When I tell somebody that most slaves were white, they look at me as though I'm telling them the earth is flat. That it is something that has been established by mainstream academic sources. Most slaves were white. Or when I tell them that the Soviet Union was far better armed than Germany in 1941, again, they look at me as though I'm talking some... Everybody knows that the Red Army was obsolete, as they say. Actually, it wasn't. It was far better armed than the German Wehrmacht. And it goes on and on and on. When I told my own mother that I claim in the book that environmentalism increases the CO2 emissions, she said, well, this doesn't make any sense. So we needed a lot of sources. Not that anybody will be convinced. People don't want to be convinced in things they don't want to be convinced, but still, we could say, here's the source, it's credible, check it out.
Yeah, it's covering your backs as much as possible because people will still not agree, and people force themselves, in a sense, not to agree. Even though you're literally in the book, you're giving them on a plate to understand and to digest, but there'll still be room for people to disagree.
Well, some people, by the way, are paid to not agree, to disagree. Dambisa Moyo made this case when she was talking about the aid for Africa, when she was answering the question why, given that giving aid to Africa makes Africa poor, why the hell then the aid continues? And her answer was that many people are actually paid to continue the aid. So if they are paid to believe that the aid is good, of course they will believe that aid is good. It's their job to believe that. And other people feel good to believe certain things, so they will also not be convinced in anything. For example, there are people, plenty of people in the West who want to be convinced that most slaves were black, because this fits their version of history. If most slaves were white, all of a sudden, all their movements and all their causes become meaningless.
Yeah, it dismisses a lot. And when you look at people that benefit financially off certain ways of thinking, then they are somewhat brainwashed into thinking it's the correct thing, because they're receiving a financial incentive. They're receiving an reward, for thinking in a certain way. And then for us, like you've just said, to dismiss that, for example, with the CO2 emissions and the whole climate conversation, if that was to be proven and dismissed, so many contracts, government contracts, so many contracts that are out there will just dissolve completely. And then these people who are profiting serious amounts of money will no longer profit. So it's like a top-down problem, right? Where the people at the top benefit financially, and then they build businesses on it, and then people who are in the businesses, work in the businesses, all get paid from it. So it just keeps going and trickling down and down and down.
Yes, and the same goes for all these tens of millions of childless families, women in the West, who have no goal in their lives, no meaning in their lives, apart from saving the planet from global warming, from capitalism, or from racism, or doing something else which is meaningful. And if you tell them that what they do actually is meaningless, you're actually trying to literally to injure them, because people who are not happy about their lives, who are not happy about their achievements, who have nothing to show for in their lives, these people have shorter lifespans. They have poor health. So basically, the truth hurts. The truth hurts physically. Never mind psychologically. Truth is hurtful. It's bad for the health of many people. Many lonely people in the West who seek solace into causes like environmentalism, feminism, wokeism, whatever other isms there are.
Or they buy cats. I know of them. We all know a cat lady or two.
And by the way, we are smiling about the crazy cat lady, but actually it's very sad. I keep repeating this because it turns out this is no joke. Really, cats spread these parasites that that affect one's thinking abilities. So actually, the mad cat lady is a tragic story.
Yeah, I've heard about this. That the more cats you have, the more chemical, I don't know what it is exactly, but there's chemical imbalance that takes place, meaning that you require more, you become more needy towards the cat, and therefore end up with even more cats.
They spread this parasite. I don't remember the name of the parasite on top of my head, and it's not in my book anyway, so I'm not supposed to remember it. No, seriously, I'm supposed to remember what's in the book, not everything. And but I was amazed how much our thinking actually is affected by purely by parasites. We don't even realize when we think something, we think that we think it because it's our individuality, our character, because we want to think it, because when we do something, we think we have our free will, and in many cases we're manipulated by so many other factors. But anyway, none of this is in When History Had Other Plans. Would you like to talk about the book?
So a common theme throughout the book is the Islamification of the West, especially in chapters 10 and 12. So, given their backwards practices, and how concerned are you about this? And do you think it's too late for the trajectory to shift within Western nations?
Well, the book is on history. It's not on making predictions. And if there is one lesson about predictions given in the book, that's that the predictions are usually wrong. This is why we cannot control society, because controlling society implies that we know that if we do this, this is what will happen. Well, it never happens this way. It never. The predictions always turn out to be wrong. And the book is actually a catalog of stories where the predictions were wrong. So I'm not even trying to give you any predictions. But by the way, about one of those chapters, the chapters on the correlation between rape jokes and rape. This chapter is not on Islam so much as on about political correctness. Because in my mind, the police was the real villain in the story of the grooming gangs. Because the British government was the enabler. They're rapists in any country. And that's a fact of life. There's nothing to be done about it. But that's not a problem as long as the police does its job, as long as the police catches and investigates and charges and all that. The British police turned a blind eye on this rape on an industrial scale because of political correctness. Not because of Islam, because of political correctness. So the British police and the political correctness are the chief culprit in this story. And unfortunately, most people are ranting only against the rapists, but not many are saying something that is pertinent.
Well done, yes.
Yes. Which is that the police are to blame as well. The British police, they made it happen. They made it possible.
And you make a good point in the book about in Western nations, the people are so reliant on the police, whereas in Eastern nations, they're more reliant on the local communities.
Well, actually, this case was made by the fathers of sociology. The first who noticed this was Ibn Khaldun, something like 6 centuries ago. He noticed this correlation between government regulation and clan mentality, and how eventually, when governments develop, this clan mentality weakens. And then it was Emil Durkheim in the 19th century who made a lot of studies. So we haven't said anything new there. But the new thing is how this affected the grooming gang story. Because the British girls were easy meat simply because there was no clan structure behind them, because they belonged to a modern society. And in a modern society, you depend on the government. And if the government is absent, you're defenseless. I come from a cultural background where clan mentality plays a bigger role in some countries of Eastern Europe, like Bulgaria, and where in some communities the clan protects you.
So when you moved to the UK, did you adjust to the changes, or did you just fit in straight?
Oh, I didn't have to adjust. I mean, I felt at home in UK. I didn't feel at home in Bulgaria. This is why I moved to UK.
And he moved to Scotland so that he could wear a kilt and eat haggis. That's why he came here.
I had to adjust all my life in Bulgaria to the Bulgarian way of life. I don't have to adjust much about anything over here. Life over here is incredibly easy, logical.
So you mentioned in the book that you lived in a house share or something called Little Bulgaria. What was that experience like?
Unpleasant, just like the big Bulgaria. Living in a little Bulgaria is as unpleasant as living in the big Bulgaria. It's even more unpleasant. But London is full of little Bulgarians and little Romanians and little Arabians and little whatever, something. If you gather together immigrants coming from a single country, whose culture is more or less the same, they recreate their own culture because this is what's common among them. This is their common sense. These are their common rules. It's kind of obvious when you think about it. They don't integrate, they recreate their own society in the country they have come from. And I experienced this firsthand in London. This was, by the way, one of the reasons I moved out of London.
Just going back to the grooming gangs just for one point. So these grooming gangs have been taking place, and due to political correctness, as you've said, and as you say in your book, it was sort of a blind eye was turned to what was going on because everyone in the police was scared or afraid, or they didn't know best way to handle it, or whatever the reason. What was the pinnacle point, though, in the past that led us to a point where the police are scared so much that they have to turn a blind eye to something so disgusting?
The country I come from, the police turns regularly a blind eye to crime because of corruption, because the police is intertwined with the criminal gangs. And here Britain became to resemble a third world country, not because it was bribed by these gangsters, but because of political correctness. So many people have made already the case that political correctness and free speech are incompatible. There is nothing new we can say about it, but there is something new we say in the book about political correctness. It is incompatible with the rule of law. You cannot have rule of law and political correctness. They don't mix, they don't go together. It's impossible because the people who are supposed to enforce the law pay attention to what the political correctness dictates. And the political correctness is not the law. The political correctness is some sort of moral code or whatever. Like in these primitive societies, pre-industrial, pre-modern societies, like before the state existed. So 6,000 years ago, there were no states. There were tribes and there were clans. And this is where the West is heading today. It is reverting to this pre-civilization stage, to tribalism. And many people use this word tribalism and they use it metaphorically. Actually, it's not a metaphor. Actually, it fits the definition of a tribe and tribalism. And this grooming gang story shows clearly that this is the case because the political correctness for many years mattered more than the law. The law is very clear, by the way. We quote in the book the exact statutes that were in force at the time this was taking place in Rotherham and other places. And yet the British police didn't apply the law. The British police was saying absurdities like that these girls were prostitutes. I mean, a girl at 11 cannot possibly be a prostitute, even if she agrees, because the law says so. And the law says clearly that any sexual act with such a girl is rape. End of story. Doesn't matter whether she agrees. By the way, they didn't agree, but this is off the point. The point is the police blatantly disregarded the British law, and this happened in Britain. And if it has happened in Britain, it can happen everywhere, which tells us that political correctness and modernity are incompatible. We are reverting to tribalism. This is where things are going in the West.
It's definitely concerning. When you say that we're going to tribalism, and if you look at where we are currently, if we stay on this same trajectory, how could it get worse than where it is at the moment?
Oh, it can always get worse, but and the story of Russia after 1917 is a perfect example. Russia was more or less a civilized society, and in a few short years it reverted into a Lord of the Flies world, with cannibalism, with people being chopped off body parts in the streets, people being murdered mundanely, just like that, and
even in murders in broad daylight, just
yes,
potential witnesses.
Yes, well. For example, one author mentions this interesting fact that because the shootings in some big Soviet cities were taking place, the public shootings under Lenin were taking place on certain days. The dogs who have good memory, they have memorized this, and they were already ready before the shooting to be there to lick the blood of the street. And there were cases where the state security people would shove chopped off body parts in broad daylight in front of the passers-by. This is what Russia turned out to be in a few short years. So when things begin to go south, they could go very far. But could we stick to what's in the book actually? Because that's predictions. The book is not about predictions. The book is about
straight facts.
Things that have already happened, more or less.
Yeah. I think Aaron just dropped off, so we'll just continue. I think he should be joining back. He's been having some internet issues, so we'll get him back. So let's just talk about the actual process of writing the book. How did you guys find working together on the book? Because it's come out, I would say, as probably one of the best reads I've read in a long time. In fact, that it was easy to read. Oh, he's back. It was easy to read, easy to digest, but yet there was so much information in there. And usually when I read sort of like non-fiction books with a lot of information, I get information overload and I've got to keep putting the book down and picking it back up and coming back. This one I could literally pick the book up and read it the whole way through in one sitting. So if you want to talk to me about the process of writing the book, I am definitely interested in that.
I was writing the book. She was in the kitchen making sandwiches.
Not a feminist.
And then she edited the book. Well, basically, that's the process.
A lot of reading, a lot of research, a lot of arguments. Because one of us is quite easygoing and one of us isn't and thinks that they know it all. I'm not saying who. But it was difficult at first to write the book, to get into a rhythm. And the best thing about the book is, it's 12 standalone chapters. So when one chapter gets tiring, you could always think, okay, I'll take a break from this. I'll go to something else and we'll go back to that next week or next month. But, it was harder than I thought it was going to be. When Vladislav invited me to join him to write the book, I thought, this is going to be easy. I've written shopping lists and lottery tickets. I can write things. But it wasn't that easy at all. It wasn't that easy. And I got involved about March 2020 when we had the big COVID lockdowns. So I had some draft chapters to get, I wanted to show to friends to say, what's your feedback? What do you think? But because we couldn't really meet up with anybody, so that made things a bit harder as well, trying to get the feedback. And we're a couple of dinosaurs, so we didn't know about Zoom until last summer, when everybody during the COVID lockdowns was obviously doing Zoom calls, Zoom meetings and things. So yeah, it was hard at first. And then it got a bit easier.
So when you went through the process of reaching out to people for feedback when you was in the writing stage, did you, with the sort of topics you're talking about through the book, did you find it difficult getting feedback off people around you?
Yes. Especially when we told them some of the chapter titles, they were quite shocked and alarmed, and they made judgments. In our book, says, no, don't judge anything, don't assume you know history. There's always more to learn. So yeah, we had some negative feedback also. I gave some draft copies to neighbours nearby, and they just gave up after maybe the first page. They read something, they thought they knew what we meant, but they didn't even challenge us or say, what does that mean? They just said, no, I can't read anymore. No, it's not from me. And that's fine.
For example, there was a neighbor of hers who had fought the commies in where? Indochina?
Somewhere in
Burma.
Yeah.
Burma. Burma. So I really wanted to know the opinion of this guy, because anybody who has fought the commies is a hero to me. And he didn't want to read because he read that we are against Churchill, and he immediately concluded that we must be one of those leftists who topple his statues.
Oh, so they took it the wrong way completely.
Yeah.
Yes. And it's interesting about Churchill that the leftists actually topple his statues, because if they knew more history, they would rather erect statues dedicated to Churchill. Because they hate the British Empire, and nobody has done more to ruin the British Empire than Churchill. But the moment you begin to talk like this about Churchill, they always assume, and this is, by the way, tribalism, and a perfect example, they always assume that you belong to the other camp. So you cannot possibly be a conservative and talk against Churchill. Actually, I'm against Churchill because I'm a conservative. Because Churchill was not a conservative to me. That's why I'm against Churchill. But all this conversation about Churchill and about many other things, by the way, are simply off the subject matter. Like Churchill is a good example because everybody has heard of Churchill. Was Churchill a racist? I don't care. Everybody was more or less racist back then. Doesn't matter. His career is not about him being a racist or not being a racist. His career is not about him making these magnificent speeches. We shall fight on the beaches, on the landing ground. We shall never surrender. And all this bullshit that is good material for movie making, the typical Hollywood bullshit. Or his way with words. If somehow his significance as a politician is about his books and his speeches, no. His significance as a politician was that he pursued a pointless and unnecessary war when he became prime minister, and he ruined the Britain and in the West, and the West at large. The world became a worse place because of Winston Churchill. And I say this as a conservative.
Yeah, which many people won't be able to comprehend because they'll listen to your statement and then judge you on that statement. They won't listen to your reasoning behind the statement.
Yes, they stop listening at this point because I'm not in their camp. That's tribalism.
Yeah.
So your neighbor didn't read any of the book because just solely based on that one view that you have?
Yeah, he read the first 2 pages. That was all he read.
Yes.
He didn't want to read any more. He was finished.
This is how people react. So when, for example, I tell them that the Soviet Union is no less to blame for the outbreak of World War II than Germany, they stop listening because to them I'm some idiot. Everybody knows that it was Germany. And when I tell them that the European Parliament says this, and by the way, it has been published, they came with a resolution, and this resolution is published on the website of the European Parliament. It has been published there for years.
Yeah, 2019.
We quote it in the book. And they look at me with disbelief, as though I'm talking something nonsensical, some rubbish, something like these cults. I belong to these cults that say that the Americans never landed on the moon or something. This is the reaction. So people are very quick to judge, yes.
Yeah, we had a lot of doors shut in our faces early on. Because obviously you want feedback from people. How well is this written? Is this interesting? Did you know this fact? What do you think about this? Is this surprising to you? But a lot of people, they would just start to read a chapter, then just gave up.
Because it's not their version of the history.
Yeah.
Was that reaction surprising to you guys, or did you anticipate it?
It was to me. I was shocked, and then I started to feel bad. I thought, oh my God, I've offended them or something. And all I've done is just challenge their thinking. That's all I did. But I think Vlad kind of expected that.
Under tribalism, facts don't matter. Tribalism is about belonging. And you don't belong to a community when you say things that are not supposed to be said in this community. So the whole human culture, it appears, has evolved around the idea of how humans bond together. So it's not about critical thinking. It's not about the truth. The truth has nothing to do with it. Nobody cares about the truth. It's about feeling good. First of all, people believe in things that make them feel good personally, and also things that make them fit into the community that matters to them. These are the two factors. The truth and the evidence have nothing to do with it. They're irrelevant. This is the reality. Even in science, it's not me saying this. People in the know have said this for decades. For example, Kuhn in The Structure of Scientific Revolutions, not an obscure book. Actually, it's the most quoted book out there, probably. He makes this case that scientists adhere, even scientists, where the evidence is supposed to matter. And I've been a lawyer for 17 years, and I can tell you this is exactly how things are in the law as well. And the grooming gang story is a perfect example of that, because the evidence was there from the beginning. The police had everything. The police had names, dates, witnesses, addresses, everything.
Car registration numbers.
Yes.
They had it all.
Yeah.
And they chose to ignore
They
it.
deliberately chose to ignore the evidence. It turns out that the evidence is irrelevant. It's what's interesting in this story. It's not Islam.
Yeah, it's the police and the fact that they're their own tribe, obviously. We're going to go down the tribe route. And if they went against the tribe, they wouldn't, and they went for the truth and what was obvious and what was clear, then they must have felt like if they stepped forward and said something, at that point, everyone else would turn their back on them, and then they wouldn't belong anywhere, and then they'll have no meaning of life. And then that's the end.
And that is tribalism. So the police officers are people belonging to a clan, to a tribe first, and then officers of the law.
Right, they influence each other. Yeah, there's no way they can turn their back on each other.
So even in a supposedly modern society like Britain, it turns out that the tribalism is more powerful than anything else.
Yeah.
This is the moral of this story.
Yeah.
For me.
No, it's a valid point. It's a very eye-opening point as well, because then you can see it in multiple different. You can see it in multiple different areas after that.
I used to work for the police. I was a civilian member of staff, so I used to type up police reports and statements, etc. I did that for 15 long years, and I saw things and heard things, and yeah, even though I worked for the police, I wasn't in their tribe, and you know something, I didn't want to be in their tribe. So I can relate to what Vlad's saying here.
Yeah, I guess it's easier from a point if you enter like a tribal sort of environment and already tell yourself you're not going to fall for it, you're not going to get trapped into it. Then you see everything from a completely different angle working that close from them. It's quite an eye-opening experience. What was the turning point that, because obviously there's a lot more police they've had no choice but to move in on the grooming gangs a bit more. But there's obviously, what was the turning point that made them need to go in and actually investigate these problems?
Well, the turning point again was tribalism. The turning point was not that all of a sudden somebody remembered what the law says. No, wasn't that at all. The law was irrelevant when it was violated, and the law was irrelevant when the law began to be applied. It was something else. It was an article that appeared in a very influential newspaper in Britain. Was it the Times?
Can't remember.
It's quoted in the book. The article.
The Times, I think it was the Times.
Yes, and from this point on, there were other voices. So again, it was the fact that what was allowed to be said began to change. People were saying different things, but again, it wasn't the government, it wasn't the law. The government was following the public moods. So Twitter is more powerful than the British Parliament. This is the moral of this story. Because people began to think about the fact that white girls could be victims and people who are not white could be abusers. When some people began to say those things, this is when the tide began to be turning. It was not the law. The law was always irrelevant. The law is irrelevant to this day.
Yeah, well, the law's just black and white. It's whoever acts on it or chooses to act on it is working in there, just going off what the public opinion is, right? What they feel like they can get away with and is socially acceptable to them. They're just working on what they feel like socially acceptable. It's one of the chapters in the book. You talk a lot about it's the one about Putin. How the West didn't discourage him. I can't remember the chapter name.
The West encouraged Putin to invade by trying to discourage him.
Yeah, that's the one. In that chapter, you talk about how Putin changes depending on the public opinion in Russia.
Yes, Putinism was not invented by Putin. Putinism was invented by the ordinary Russians. Putin simply made use of these public moods that today we know as Putinism. He just gave the name. If it was not Putin, it would have been somebody else. The name would not have been Putinism, but say, I don't know, let's think of a Russian name, Ivanovism or something. But it would have been the same. It's not about Putin. It's about Russia and about the West.
Yeah, I didn't. So with reading that chapter, I didn't know that in Russia, Western leaders were looked up as like something great back in the Soviet Union times. But now obviously the narrative's changed so much because I didn't know that initially. They looked at like Margaret Thatcher and saw her as something great.
Oh, Margaret Thatcher was our hero. I mean, I came to Scotland and find out was shocked to find out that people don't like Margaret Thatcher. How somebody not like Margaret Thatcher? She was the greatest. Not Muhammad Ali. She was the greatest.
Not for Scotland, she wasn't. Yeah, Margaret Thatcher was quite well known and respected in Bulgaria, and obviously England mostly, but in Scotland, I'm afraid I was raised to hate Margaret Thatcher, and I didn't even know why. I just followed my tribe, I just followed the crowd, and it's solely, I don't want to repeat myself, but in the last 5 years getting involved in writing the book with Vladislav, that I learned a lot more about her and the British government, and I'm slowly starting to like her. I don't hate her anymore. But again, that goes back to tribalism. You're told what you must think. You're told who you must vote for. A lot of my relatives growing up, they would vote for Labour. Didn't matter what Labour did. You vote for Labour, that's who you vote for. You don't dare deviate and go else. Don't even look elsewhere. You just blindly vote for Labour. And that's what I was told. And like I said, in recent years, I've learned how to think for myself and look at different options.
Yeah, that's the key thing, right? Is people are told not even to look at the other parties, not even listen to them, not even think about them. Anything you hear from them, just disagree from them from the get-go. And that causes more issues than it does fixing.
Yeah.
Well, I was raised to hate Margaret Thatcher. I mean, we were taught from early age that Margaret Thatcher and Ronald Reagan were the worst. And this is exactly why we love them so much. Exactly, because under socialism, you believed exactly in the opposite of what they tell you. Because usually the truth under socialism is the exact opposite of what the propaganda tells you.
Right. Yeah. So when you look at sort of tribal, you can look at tribalism in the West and definitely in England and UK, and it's so clear as day because there's so many different tribes. But under socialism, how did you experience tribalism?
Tribalism under socialism was not about ideas. Everybody was cynical. There were no ideas. Tribalism under socialism was about interest, about trading favors. It was you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. This type of thing. Sometimes it's under socialism, everything was about blood relations, because obviously you could mostly rely on your brother, your cousin, your aunt, and she could rely on you and this sort of thing. But very often complete strangers belonged to the same clan. But none of this was about ideas. Nobody cared about ideas. Everybody was cynical. This is the only good thing about socialism, that you become immune to these tribal ideas. You are not easily taken over by ideologies. Okay. So under socialism, these tribes were about making a career, finding some television to buy, because you could not just go to the shop and find whatever you're looking for, finding meat to buy very often, stuff like that, arranging things under the counter. It was a form of corruption. While today, tribalism in the West is a feel-good activity. There are many people who the communists used to call these people useful idiots. Many people who are willing to shout and to do things without being paid, without having any material interest. Yes, there are many others who actually make a good living in this walk industrial complex. But the vast majority of those who shout in the streets, who shout down speakers, who wave flags and do other things, this vast majority are useful idiots. But by the way, this is something that the walk today have in common with the National Socialists back in the 20s and in the 30s. There are at least 5 things. Where's the camera? 5 things they have in common. So the walk of today and the National Socialists both shouted down speakers, intimidated political opponents in the street, played the victim card, practiced cancel culture, and most interestingly, were racist. And if something walks like a duck and quacks like a duck, it's most probably a duck. And this, by the way, tells us that the walk today are the real neo-Nazis, not these few idiots who still make the Nazi salute on the football matches. They're the real neo-Nazis today. But anyway, under socialism, you become a total cynic. You don't believe in anything. Yes, at the beginning, back in the days of Lenin, there may have been useful idiots. But by the 80s, when I was a teenager, all these countries under socialism, they have run out of useful idiots. And they were just these cynics who were trying to make a living. And tribalism was about that.
Yeah, it turns into more survival than it does in the current state of the West, where it's people are running out of ideas in terms of well, they've got too many ideas. If you're saying that it wasn't about ideas in socialism, at the moment it seems like a lot of people have too many ideas to the point where they want their idea to be different, and therefore create a new idea and then start screaming and shouting about that. So it lacks a lot of purpose with a lot of the tribes that you see today in the West.
But if you allow me, we are talking generalities here. Could we get back to the nitty gritty? Is this the expression?
Yeah.
Nitty gritty of the book, because the book is not a philosophical book, as you know. It's not a book full of musings, of opinions, of generalizations. It's full of specific facts that are very verifiable. So could we please go on with the book, the exact stories that
one point you made in the book about Spain using diesel generators at night when they're using it for the solar panel farms. They're using diesel generators to take advantage of the subsidies from the Spanish government. I found that was an interesting point.
Well, that's just a curious story that made it into the newspapers. But what is not doesn't, because the journalists could get it. They're typically ignorant, but they can get something that the average person, layperson in the street can get. What is often missed by the journalists is that more or less the whole of this green economy that the environmentalists come with works along the same lines. It's an inherently convoluted way of producing energy. To understand this, you need just to understand physics for the high school physics. Because there are too many conversions, too many different processes, and every conversion adds complexity. Every conversion leads to energy loss and all that. The whole idea, for example, of storing energy, that is an inherently bad idea, and it's bad not because we still don't have suitable batteries, whatever these batteries could be, chemical batteries, mechanical batteries, whatever, all sorts of batteries thinkable, but because of the laws of thermodynamics. So this is something that the journalists miss when they report curious facts about Spain, how they were producing solar energy at night. Because this is a curious fact that everybody can get, that this is an absurdity. But what they don't get is that even when the solar energy is produced by solar batteries, say in Scotland, it is still a bad idea. And it's a bad idea because of physics. And it's also a bad idea because of political and economic reasons. Because ultimately, an energy source will take over simply if it's if people all over the world, if it's cheaper. That's it. That's the bottom line. Whatever is cheap will fly. And there is only one energy source that fits the bill, solving the global warming. And that's nuclear, because nuclear is the only green energy that could easily be cheaper than coal. And all these transitions, energy transitions throughout history, or any technological transition throughout history, has never come about because there was some movement like the environmentalist movement. It always came about because it was cheaper. For example, today we're using transistors and not lamp valves, simply because it's cheaper. And transistors are way greener because they consume way less energy. Most people today don't even know what lamp valves are. Lamp valves are these vacuum devices where you have cathodes, anodes, and you have to heat them. This is okay. Let me not go there. But back when the computers were developed in the 50s, they were using lamps or lamp valves. And today the computers are way more environmentally friendly. Why? Well, simply because it's much cheaper to make them with transistors. It didn't happen because some environmentalists protested against wasting of energy. And they were incredibly wasteful. I mean, they were the first computers, they were as large as houses, and they would produce so much heat that in the middle of the winter you could go naked around this computer. You could actually be inside the computer because they were so large, and they would cost millions of dollars. Many people don't even remember this.
Hold on, you can go inside the computer? What do you mean?
Well, the computer was a building.
Okay, right.
So this is how you could go inside it.
Wow.
And they needed to go inside it because very frequently something will be burned. One of those lamp valves will burn, and the technicians must go there and find which one needs replacement and replace it. So actually you need to be technically inside the computer. Otherwise, how would... But the thing is, every technological development came about as a result of free market forces. And the first steam engines, they had efficiency of less than 1%. And today they regularly have 40+% efficiency. The same goes, by the way, about the development of nuclear. Only the difference is that while computers were left to the market, and then they tremendously developed, the nuclear energy was left to the government. And the nuclear energy today is basically somewhat refined. The models today in use today are refined models from the 1950s. A nuclear engineer from the 50s would be able to find a job in a modern nuclear power plant. And why is that? Because government. And here come the environmentalists. Because the environmentalists made certain that the fears of the nuclear, everything nuclear, are stoked.
Yeah.
Yes. And this means a lot of regulations. Because if the voters are scared of nuclear energy, the government is involved. And if the government is involved, there is no more development. And this is how we are stuck with undeveloped nuclear energy. Otherwise, the nuclear energy would have licked all other forms a long time ago, and there will be no danger of global warming. And these children is how actually environmentalism causes the global warming. As absurd as this may sound, when you go through the facts, you see that the environmentalists are to blame for the global warming. Not capitalism, not these greedy corporations, because the greedy corporations want cheap energy, and they would have switched to nuclear a long time ago.
Right, yeah, they benefit obviously from cheap energy.
But the environmentalists make sure that the cheapest form of energy is coal. So this is how we are stuck with coal, and this is why we have global warming, because of environmentalism. This is the idiocy of the situation.
And China produces 1 coal power plant per week. And how many die per year from coal? Is it thousands? And injuries?
There are different studies, but the most conservative studies estimate the number of those who die prematurely per year because we are using coal into hundreds of thousands every year.
And yet nuclear, it doesn't happen.
Why do France have such a relaxed attitude towards nuclear?
Oh yeah, France.
That's an interesting question. I don't know the answer. But I can tell you about Germany, because the environmentalists had their way in Germany. Germany ditched all nuclear power plants and reverted back to coal, and Germany increased its CO2 emissions. So the more environmentalism, the more CO2. It's not some poetic form of speech. It's not some metaphor. It's literally so. When you go through the facts, you see that environmentalism increases CO2 production. That's it. Just like socialism that didn't free the workers, socialism enslaved something like, just in the Soviet Union, something like 40 million people. And just like Hitler didn't help the Germans, he devastated Germany. And just like feminism doesn't add rights to the females, to the women. It takes rights away. And just like the minimum wage doesn't increase the wage of the workers, it decreases their income. And it goes on and on and on. All these good causes and the foreign aid for Africa, which makes the Africans poorer. Not just the Africans, by the way. The foreign aid has been tried in Asia. The results were the same with Korea, for example, is an example. South Korea. Well, South Korea received foreign aid. It was one of the poorest countries in the world. Then the foreign aid stopped. And today, South Korea is one of the richest countries in the world. So if you want to keep them poor, give them aid.
Yeah, that chapter was surprising for me, just because it's not something I've really looked into before. But the way we're advertised on TV, you know, all the adverts come on about don't text this number and you can donate. But it's once I've read the chapter, obviously it's clear as day that that is just putting a plaster on the issue that's at hand there. And the longer you keep putting a plaster over the issue, the worse the issue is going to get. But no one's actually producing a solution for the cause of the issue.
Actually, not only putting plaster on the issue, sorry to disagree here. It's actually worse than that. You're making the issue much worse. Because first of all, you increase corruption in this country that receives aid. You decrease production. You increase import. It leads to something that takes a long time to explain, so I will not even start, called Dutch disease. And it bankrupts local industries, and the list goes on and on and on. So if you want to damage the economy of a country, give it aid.
Yeah, the aid one was a funny one, but the one which I think is a bit, when he talks about raising the minimum wage, obviously lowers the income. That one is shock. I understood that one before reading the chapter, but that's shocking how many people won't be able to put together the simple sort of maths equation that shows you how raising the minimum wage is bad. If you go out on the street and talk to anyone and just tell them the title of that chapter, they're going to disagree with you straight away and say, no, these people need more money. They need more money. Like, it needs to be raised. But it's so clear and evident that raising anything's not gonna fix any of the issues. Raising the price. I think the chapter that you wrote there was clear as day on how bad raising the minimum wage is.
Actually, we did that. We tested the chapter titles online and by random people on the street, at the bus stop. Well, you've read the chapter titles, you know yourself. They're quite shocking, some of them, but we did that on purpose. And yeah, it caused lively discussions. It caused maybe brief, I don't want to say argument, disagreements is a good word, disagreements, but really arguments. People were quite shocked at the chapter titles, and especially minimum wage. That was one of the ones I remember from like 4 years ago. People were like, no, you're wrong. You've got it all wrong. It's like, no, if you read the chapter, because we would just go about with draft chapters printed off. Just sort of, if we bumped into someone we knew, maybe at the supermarket, as there were, decently spaced out, we would say to people, have a read at that, what do you think? And if they even bothered to read, they were still like, no, that can't be true. You're just making this up. So we get a lot of reactions to especially that chapter. Minimum wage.
And yet we say nothing new. I mean, this has been established for decades, and it's interesting how the evidence again doesn't matter. I mean, the experiment has been done all over the world. Every time the results are the same. It is something that you could read in most textbooks on economics, yet it doesn't matter. We only try to come with new examples to make it more understandable. But apart from that, we say nothing new.
A minimum wage seems to be a big topic that when people are going to vote, they'll vote based on, they're planning to increase minimum wage, so I'll vote for this party.
because it's marketed as
shows,
more is better, right? More means
it
good.
shows the importance of that chapter that I think everyone should understand and read it.
Go on, talk. You're good at giving lectures.
Well, I'm waiting for a question.
Oh yeah, that's true. That's actually a question. I've got an overall question for you because the book is great and you hit on many different topics. What was it that ignited you to write this book? Like, what was the reason, the core reason why you thought this book needed to exist?
Well, the reactions of the people she talked about. The fact that although these things are more or less have been known for a long time, they're still not known by the lay people in the street.
Yeah, they're not known by people like me. Like he mentioned a few minutes ago, oh, this information could be found in an economics textbook. I wouldn't know the economics, I can't even say economics, I'll say it again. I wouldn't know the economics God at that time, textbook were chipped over it. And I'm just a very regular working class person, so I'm not in the business of reading textbooks, economics or otherwise. But oh, by the way, guys, it was our anniversary at the weekend. We've had 9 fun-filled years together. Can you imagine? Can you imagine 9 years with this man who knows everything, who gives a lecture and everything? Can you imagine the fun it's been? And can you imagine how high my blood pressure's got over the last 5 years? But
it would be fun if you listen to the lectures.
Yes, I don't listen to the lectures because you go on and on and on. Anyhow, so when we first met, and we were just talking about general things, and one of the things he realised was the history and general knowledge that I have, and like your average person in Britain has, it doesn't really match what people in other countries like in Europe have. So he was surprised at the things I didn't know about history. It's not that I'm stupid or uneducated, but it's just it's like what we're fed in this, well, in the country, in Britain, like our general knowledge, our history, what we learn from. I always joke about this. I learned a lot of history from TV shows. I learned a lot of history from Dad's Army, Blackadder, even an episode of Fawlty Towers, when Basil Fawlty has a disagreement with one of the German guests in the hotel restaurant, and obviously Indiana Jones movies. But Vlad always finds that funny, but I'm serious. I learned a lot of history from that. But so he was surprised at the history that I didn't know, and that was, and other people in Britain, and that kind of prompted him to write the book, to show people that there's more to the history that you think you know, but you don't know. And the history, like we always say, has unintended consequences.
Much of what people think they know, they don't know. Much of what passes for conventional wisdom actually is just fantasy. It's based on Hollywood reality. My favorite example, the Soviet Union in 1941, because the Germans reached Moscow and everybody believes Enemy at the Gates. Enemy at the Gates is a Hollywood movie which shows how 2 Red Army soldiers are given 1 rifle and told, when one of you dies, the other one will take his rifle or something. This is pure moonshine. It has nothing to do. And it's interesting where, by the way, it's interesting where all these lies came from. So the first one who began lying, and for good reason, about the Soviet army not being well armed, was Stalin. And we quote in the book the first time he began making those speeches. Where exactly? Because Stalin had to hide 2 things. He had to explain in an acceptable way why the Germans are at the gates of Moscow. And he had to hide 2 things. First, that he prepared an invasion of Europe when the Germans invaded first. And second, that the Soviet population rose against the communists, that the Red Army virtually disintegrated. Very few Soviet soldiers actually fought in 1941. Even in 1942, they didn't want to fight. So Stalin began with those lies that actually the Germans are so successful because they're better armed. And the West, Hollywood liked the idea. And in every Hollywood movie, you will see how the German soldiers are on tanks and the Soviet soldiers are fighting with their bare hands or something. They don't even have rifles, which is amazing, which is the exact opposite of what is true. But it's like this in so many other areas. People also tend to think that Britain somehow, by fighting when Germany occupied France, by continuing the fight, somehow saved the world. Nothing of the kind happened. It was a pointless war, which only helped the Soviet Union. So Churchill, who is supposedly the savior of Britain and the free world, we shall fight on the beaches. Great Hollywood, the darkest hour. Actually, he, like I already said, he saved Soviet blood and Soviet treasure. He wasted British blood and British treasure in order to save Soviet blood and Soviet treasure. He bankrupted the British Empire in order to enlarge the Soviet Empire, a genocidal empire, which exterminated millions of people after this point in Eastern Europe and in Asia, in other places. And so many other things are just have nothing to do with what people believe. The truth is very different, and it's verifiable. I mean, for example, take Churchill. What was the point of continuing the war when after Dunkirk? I mean, there is only one question you need to ask. Could the Germans successfully invade the British Isles? And the answer given by every credible author in the field is no, never. The Operation Sea Lion was an inherently bad idea. Even the Germans who were drunk on their victories recognized this. I mean, the chances of Hitler taking over Britain were as good as him taking over the moon or something. So what was the point of this war? The clever thing to do at this point, and this is something that no Brit actually thinks of, although it's kind of obvious. What was the point of this war? Why was this war necessary? Wouldn't it have been better to sit on the sidelines and let the two totalitarian monsters, Hitler and Stalin, kill each other? But nobody wants to see it like this, because then if you see it like this, then the next question is, why the hell my grandfather died in this war, and why we bankrupted the country and were bombed, and why was all this? What was the point? And there was no point. This is the sad reality. And this explains why many things in history, what is believed is so much different from what actually was, because people have interest to believe certain things.
Yeah, because the main thing, definitely what I was taught throughout school in my history lessons, was that the main thing throughout the whole thing was how evil and bad and disgusting Hitler was. It was all focused on Hitler. We did very, very, very little on USSR in my school education.
Well,
yeah, same here.
Hitler was evil and disgusting, but that doesn't make Stalin good and the good Uncle Joe of some of the Hollywood movies. Stalin was even more evil and more disgusting. So there is a Russian author who puts it like this. I like his statement. The fact that Hitler was a man-eater doesn't mean that Stalin was a vegetarian. I mean, there is no connection there. Okay, Al Capone was a gangster. That doesn't mean that his the competing band of gangsters who were against him were better than him. There is no connection there. Stalin actually was worse than Hitler, and that's a verifiable fact, because the National Socialist Germany, according to Professor Rummel, Death by Government in his other works, have exterminated somewhere in the region of 21 million people. And under Stalin, something like 50 million people were exterminated. So 50 is more than 21. And also the Soviet Union was more to blame for the outbreak of World War II. Because yes, both Germany and the Soviet Union signed the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact. So they're both to blame, no doubt about that. They both divided Poland, and this is how it all began. But it was the Soviet Union that came with the idea. Because initially Hitler just wanted Danzig. But Stalin sweetened the deal. You could have more. Why only Danzig? Have half of Poland, half to you, half to me. And it was Stalin who actually made World War II happen. Because Stalin knew very well what Britain and France will do when Hitler invades. And this is what they did. They played their parts in the Stalin's play perfectly well. But not many people in Britain want to see this way, because again, why my grandfather died in this war? Why my grandfather was injured in this war? See, she has a neighbor, for example, Hamlet.
Yeah.
What was the injury that
he was shot through the chin and the jaw, and it was replaced by a metal plate.
Yeah. This guy suffered all his life.
Yeah.
For what? So that Churchill could make a speech and be the greatest Briton. What else was achieved apart from Churchill making a career?
Yeah, nothing was won. We didn't win anything.
Everything was lost. The empire was lost. What was the point?
Society, the economy.
So in Bulgaria, is this common knowledge, common history taught?
No. The Bulgarians, like every nation, has its favorite historical myths and cherished myths, and the
Good.
But these myths are bad. When you have myths, cherished myths about history, yes, this may help a nation to be bonded together, because we all Brits, we all believe that we stopped Hitler, all that. Okay, this is the good part. But the bad part is when you believe in falsehoods, you make more the same mistakes in the future. You are more willing to start pointless, unnecessary wars. And the latest wars in Iraq and in Afghanistan are an illustration to this. Pointless, unnecessary wars. Because it's all connected with this myth. And by the way, the same applies, for example, to the Russians. Why the Russians were so easily convinced that they must attack their neighbors. Because of World War II, because they've been raised to believe that they saved the world from Hitler in World War II, which is again a myth, because they caused all this. They even to blame the Soviet Union. Well, not the other Russians, but the Soviet Union even is to blame for the right to Hitler rising to power. Of course, Stalin did his best. This is another thing that we quote sources in the book. Stalin did his best to nurture Hitler, to help Hitler come to power. Have you heard of this story? Have you heard of this story?
No, with what Stalin did to nurture Hitler.
Well, it was very simple. There were three big political parties when in 1933 during the elections. And these were the Communist Party, the National Socialist Party of Hitler, and the Social Democrats in Germany. And the Social Democrats and the Communists had the clever idea to unite so that they could beat the National Socialists, because the Communists and the Social Democrats together were way stronger. And here Stalin got involved, and Stalin forbade the Communists to unite with the Social Democrats. Stalin actually was calling the Social Democrats social fascists. By the way, that's another thing that the leftists today in the West don't know, that where this calling of your opponent fascist, this was started by Stalin, but that's another story. The thing is, Hitler emerged, Hitler took power. His party won most seats in the Reichstag because there was no coalition between communists and social democrats. And that was because of Stalin. So Hitler came to power because of Stalin. And Stalin helped him, by the way, in other ways as well. But let's not go. There are other books written on the subject which just mention some of these stories. The thing is, the Russians are to blame. Well, the Soviet Union is to blame. Their former country is to blame for World War II. But this is not the way they see it. They believe in their own myth, which is that they saved the world from Hitler. And because they believe in this myth of the good World War II, or the way they call it, the Great Patriotic War. Again, another term that Stalin coined. They're still using it. And because they believe this bullshit, they're easily convinced to start wars today. This is the problem with myths. Myths need to be debunked, because the more you believe in myths, the more mistakes you make today. The more deluded you are about the past, the more stupid things you do today.
Well, it's a generational thing, right? If you have a cover up or a story which covers the truth up, the people that know the truth sooner or later are going to die, and then you're going to be left with people who are believing the lie. So then less and less people will know what actually happened unless you talk about it.
Pardon me, it works in the opposite way usually in history. As long as the people who participated in the events are alive, they have a vested interest that lies are circulated. When the last one of them dies, it becomes easier for the society to accept the truth. Example, if they're living veterans, it's not easy to tell those veterans you fought for nothing. It's not easy to tell the families of those who lost loved ones, your loved ones died for nothing. But once it is far away in history, it becomes easier. So the truth is possible to emerge only when those who have vested interest in the lie are no longer around.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, you do talk about in the book about Putin's taking over of Ukraine or war on Ukraine. And well, the way it worked here, obviously, was it all came out in the media. Putin's going on a mad rampage to take Ukraine. And then after a few weeks, you were then sort of told, oh, it's because NATO was pushing up right towards Russia when Putin wanted to be a member of NATO, but was disallowed. But what would you say is the core reason why Putin is going for Ukraine?
The core reason is that he wants to be popular. If I have to express it in one sentence, that would be it. So,
popular among who, though? The voters?
Popular among the Russians.
But he is popular at the moment. It wasn't popular before 2014 Crimea.
Yes.
But he wants to maintain his popularity or increase it.
Yes. Yes, because Russia is a bad place to live. The Russians are frustrated people. Low standards of living, corruption everywhere, potholes in the streets, all that, mafia. Nothing works in Russia. And Putin is their Superman. This gives them this relief. It's a compensatory mechanism. Why the nerds need to imagine that they're Superman? And why Superman is a nerd in his life?
His day job, yeah.
Yes, day job, and because this makes him relatable to the nerds, because the nerds are people who are fearful and what's the word for somebody who is timid? A pussy, timid? Yes,
timid's a better
timid.
word for you,
they need to believe that they're Superman, that they have superpowers, because
hope.
Yes. And Putin plays a similar role for the Russians and what Putin does, because the Russians want to believe, yes, our lives are grim, but we belong to this great state, Russia, and everybody fears Russia, and we have nuclear weapons, and the West fears us, and all of a sudden these little people, these Lilliputs, who have no dignity and no backbone in real life, all of a sudden they feel great, this greatness. And Putin gives them that. And if it was not Putin again, it would have been somebody else. And Putin's popularity was wearing off before Crimea. After Crimea, it exploded. And but then there were 8 years where nothing much happened, and his popularity was again going down. So he needed some new stunt.
Yeah.
But by the way, I was wrong there. I thought that he will invade some smaller country. I didn't expect that he will invade Ukraine, because Ukraine. I thought that Ukraine is not a good idea to invade. I thought that maybe it will be Georgia or some other former country that is not in NATO, because obviously he cannot invade China. China is too powerful. He cannot invade NATO because NATO is too powerful. So he has to invade some soft target. And I thought that it will be some former Soviet republic, but not Ukraine, because Ukraine was getting stronger and stronger. So, like I said, I expected that it will be somebody else will be the victim. But again, it has nothing to do with the interests of Russia, geostrategy, all this bullshit that the Western observers talk about. Because they're book knowledgeable, they have never lived in Russia or in any post-socialist country. They don't know the feelings of the people. And I could see the feelings of the Russians where the moods were similar to the moods in Bulgaria. Only Bulgaria is a small country, and small countries behave like prostitutes, while big countries behave like gangsters. So,
what?
Well, somebody else said this. I wish it was me, but I'm just quoting here. I don't remember the name. But yeah, again, big countries behave like gangsters. Small countries behave like prostitutes. So, while a big country is having its way using muscle.
Careful.
Okay, I'm not saying the other thing. It's not a muscle anyway. It's something filled with blood, so it's not a muscle.
Oh boy.
I didn't say it. Small countries try to use some big country for protection to their advantage. So the Bulgarians are being a small people. They behave like prostitutes, while the Russians behave like gangsters. But it's similar. So the Russians want to have an empire, and the Bulgarians want to be a part of an empire. Okay, let's put it like this. So for the Bulgarians, the EU was supposed to be the new Soviet Union or something. So this is why this is the reason for this war. And in order to deal with a war, you need to know the motivation of your enemy. This is the motivation. The motivation is psychological. The ordinary Russians, it's a feel-good activity for them. Now it is for normal people for the normal people who live in the West is try to understand this, how it's a feel-good activity to fight and to be shot at, but they're not Russians. The Russians are brawlers. They want to assert themselves by violence. It's a feel-good activity. They want to feel they're frustrated people who feel good when they beat up somebody. That's it. So they needed a victim. That's it.
So for the war to end, it would require Putin to be able to say to the Russian citizens, "We won this war. We're strong. We're the greatest country in the world."
When History Had Other Plans says nothing about what is needed for the war to end. It says it talks only about how the war came about. It's a book on history. It's not a book on what needs to be done.
Okay, but what do you think needs to be done?
Well, what I personally think, and what has nothing to do with the book, is that I wish Maggie Thatcher was around, because Maggie Thatcher was not to be trifled with. And she was not going for half measures. She was not a yes minister type of person. She had backbone. She had balls. So I wish the West still had politicians like her. And if the West had politicians like her, Russia would be in a bear. The Ukraine would be a bear trap for Russia. So all we needed to do was to pump shells into Ukraine until Russia crumbles. But we didn't do that. Three years down the road, we still depend on the Americans to deliver the shells. And obviously the American taxpayers are asking, well, why? What this has to do with us? Why the Europeans don't pull the sled and we have always to do the heavy lifting? And it's a reasonable question, really. Why? Why us, the Europeans, are not doing our part? 3 years. For 3 years, we didn't put new production lines for production of shells. By us, I mean not just the Brits, all the Europeans. So at first, I thought that the war, Russia has lost the war, because the economies of the West are so far larger than the economy of Russia. Economically, Russia is dwarfed by us. So if we wanted, we could have licked them a long time ago, but we didn't do it. And Ukraine was by and large left on its own. And the economy of Russia is far larger than the economy of Ukraine, not to mention its human resources. So the same reasoning works in reverse. In a prolonged war becomes a war of attrition. And a war of attrition, the party that has larger resources wins. So if it's Russia against Ukraine, Russia wins every time. If it's the West against Russia, the West wins every time. So this is, and there lies the answer of what could be done and what was not done so far and what will probably never be done.
Okay. You got any more questions, Con?
Yes. You did mention about, in the book, there was a section about Hitler being an Islamist. I guess, yeah, if you don't mind talking on that point, like what leads you to believe that he's an Islamist?
Well, the sources. We haven't come to this conclusion. I don't know whether we could call him Islamist. As far as I know, he was not a Muslim, but he was fond of Islam. He liked Islam. He was ranting, and the sources for that are in the memoirs of some of the people who were around him. They have written about this, how he was ranting against Christianity because Christianity was the religion of meek people, and he was thinking how much better it would be if the Germans were Muslim instead of Christians. So because he was a warmonger, he liked a religion that, in his words, was a religion for men, warriors. So this is what he liked about Islam. And this is why he disliked Christianity.
Ah, right. Okay. So he felt like the Christianity religion was a bit portrayed as more like a weaker sort of religion for the people. Because
this is how he was describing it: religion for weak people.
When I initially obviously looked through the chapters before I actually read the book, when I read that off the bat, I thought it was going to be more about Hitler going down the Islamic route because it's a religion that could be seen as more controllable, more easily to influence, more easy to sort of controlling. Control is probably not the right word, but to have easy influence over a certain population.
Yeah, but that's not in the sources. So if you'd like, we could actually see the
book here?
The source is
it page 80?
Give me a second
Okay.
to find it, and we will be able to, because it's just a few lines.
Yeah, it was like a sub part of a chapter rather than the full.
Yes.
It's in the chapter 5.
Page 80.
Thank you. Yeah.
It's a tiny section in relation to the rest of the book.
Well, there is a long quote there, and it's from Albert Speer. And here is what Hitler said according to Albert Speer. It has been our misfortune to have the wrong religion. Why did it have to be Christianity with its meekness and flabbiness? Islam was a man religion. If I read this correctly in German, I don't speak German. So a religion of men, and hygienic too. So it's not about manipulation. It's about the fact that Islam is a religion for men and it's hygienic. The soldiers of Islam received a warrior's heaven, a real earthly paradise with huris. I'm not sure what huris are. Something of the Muslim paradise, I guess. And wine flowing. This, Hitler argued, was much more suited to the Germanic temperament. So this is his angle. This is what he likes about Islam.
Mm-hmm. Horace is women, by the way.
I thought that. I didn't want to say anything inappropriate. I thought it meant...
It says here that it's maiden women with beautiful eyes.
Oh, right, okay.
But yeah, it could be translated into...
Yeah, it sounds like the word. I'll whisper it. Yes, okay.
Yeah, sounds like this word. I don't know. I'm not an expert on Arabic, so I cannot be the judge here. That's just a curious fact. That's not the main thing. The main thing is, like I said before, the fact that Hitler opened the floodgates to multiculturalism.
Yeah.
Multiculturalism is his political legacy.
Mm.
Just like the political legacy of Churchill is the destruction of the British Empire.
Yeah.
And what socialism achieved post-slavery, and the list goes on and on. And the political legacy of the environmentalist movement would be the global warming. And the political legacy of feminism would be destruction of the female rights, abolishment of the female rights. And the list goes on and on and on. Every time the opposite is achieved, and here is the lesson. If there is one in this, if there is moral in this story, in this book, that this is it. So be skeptical when somebody tells you we will improve society, we will make things better.
Yeah. No, this has been great. Thanks, guys, for coming on. Have you got any plans for your next book, or is that thinking a bit too far ahead at the moment?
Well, funny you should mention that. There is another book.
Well, I've been working for 15 years on a book on why socialism fell.
Cool.
And it's I can tell you just this: it's not Gorbachev. Gorbachev again was just the face of it. Just like Putinism is not about Putin. Perestroika was not about Gorbachev.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay, here's a fun fact. The first perestroika in the Soviet Union was attempted after the death of Stalin in 1953 by Lavrenti Beria, one of the arch-Stalinists, a mass murderer. And as early as 1953, he was not successful. And there were several more attempts. But for the Westerners, it all starts with Gorbachev, and Gorbachev made it happen. No, it was not Gorbachev. The reasons for the downfall of socialism were deeper, way deeper than that. They go to the core of what socialism is. And it's not economical, by the way. That's another misconception, because everybody says, yeah, we know the Soviet economy was inefficient. Actually, the Soviet economy was inefficient, like any socialist economy, but as inefficient as it was getting better and better. It was growing, actually. So it was not, the reasons were not economic. They were social.
Yeah.
But to understand this, you need to go beyond most of the books written on the subject, because most of the books written on the subject are books by people who have read the books of their colleagues in the West. So these are people who never lived there. Most of them don't even speak Russian or any other language. They don't have first-hand experience. They create more or less these speculations that are based based on another book, on another book, on book, on book. It's not reality. It's a virtual reality.
But that book he's talking about, the next book, it's a lot more intense than this book. This book is, I hate to say commercial, but yeah, I think it's more easily understood and enjoyed. And this book he's working on, it's a bit more serious.
Yeah, the book on why socialism fell is a book that is a niche project that would be interesting to few people, and that requires interest. While this book, When History Had Other Plans, it's a book for the everyday Joe. And it has implications in the practice in the life today.
Iron board. I told him to move the iron board.
It only took you 1.5 hours to notice it.
Is this what you're thinking of?
Yes. He was giving these long lectures and my mind was wandering. I was thinking, so I'm not wearing my best glasses. I was thinking, is that my iron board still sitting there? And it is. Oh, good. They can't edit that out.
No.
It's okay, that's fine. It's a nice iron board. It's got love hearts, so it's cool. It's cool.
No, but thank you very much for taking the time to talk to us today, and we'll leave a link to the book in the description. So if anyone that's listening wants to go and buy that, there'll be a link there, easily accessible, and we'll also put a link on our website to it as well, and we'll just keep that link on there.
That's great. Thanks very much, guys.
Thank you, guys.
Cheers, guys.
Thank you.
See you later.
Bye-bye.
Bye.